joining us today on our latest Class of 2024 info session. Today we're going to be talking a lot about financial aid and the resources that are out there. We know that affordability can be one of the largest barriers to a college education. And so we want to make sure that all of your questions get answered as you're making the final determinations in terms of where you're going to go to school and earn your degree from. So joining us today, and I can't thank him more than enough for coming and joining us today, is Mr. Hank Fuller, who's our Director of Financial Aid here at the Citadel, to talk more about the programs that we have in place that can assist students and cadets like yourself that are coming here and being able to afford a college tuition. Mr. Fuller, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with all of your incoming students here, as I was surprised to see so many of us joining here at one time. I was able to get some questions that I could answer, and that is the format that I plan on using here, but the chat feature was mentioned, and so as you have more questions, feel free to come in and ask those as we go through. And so question and answer process here, and I'm going to be talking a lot, so I welcome any interruptions as new questions would come up or insights. So the first question came up was, so how much loans cover, and can they be applied for yearly? And so we're going to basically start out here with broad numbers and tell you that if you have applied for financial aid, you're going to have the notice on Lassane Gateway for you to check not only our cost of attendance, whether you're in state or out of state, but your financial aid, if you have applied, would be included on that Lassane Gateway portal. And so in general, students can only borrow a smaller amount of money, but an out-of-state student is going to be paying $55,000 their first year, and an in-state student is going to be paying $30,000 the first year. And if you have applied for a federal loan, you would be out there $5,500 against the $5,500 or $55,000 cost, would leave you paying $50,000, and you would have to have another resource like a Parent Plus loan or a private student loan that you were able to get a cosigner for. These would cover your entire cost, and you can apply for them every year. And so the answer to the question is, you can get student loans. They can cover up to your full cost, in-state and out-of-state. But the federal programs are just one part of that. And so I really don't want everybody to be so far in debt. The engineering programs themselves have advertised that they have a great placement rate, and they also advertise one of the highest average salaries of students in our entire state, really. And so it's good for students to be able to take a little debt and come out and afford to repay it. But the answer to the question about can you borrow every year is yes. We don't want you to have to borrow the full amount, but yes. So second question I have that, and again, you'll see I'll ad lib from the one question to answer 5 more. The scholarship, are there more scholarships available after the first year? And the answer is yes. The engineering department itself, throughout all of the engineering sub-branches, have one of the largest scholarship programs in the school. So sophomores are more eligible than freshmen, juniors more eligible than sophomores. It seems that there are more scholarships available as you go through your years here. And generally speaking, there is a separate application in the engineering department, and we'll get you to fill that out along with an institutional application. And we'll ask that you do that in March of each year, typically. So you'll have your first semester grades behind you, and you'll be set up for your sophomore year after in the spring coming. And we're going to suggest that you have at least a 3.0 GPA. In-state students, of course, will be eligible for the life scholarship with that 3.0, and that is increased in these science programs, science and engineering. So they're worth $7,500 for an in-state student. But the average award is probably $5,000 to really about $10,000 in the engineering fields in those areas. Can't get money. It's competitive. So you have a large number of students that are competing with you in your class, and that's who you basically are working with each year to try to get as much scholarships as you could. I want to say the average scholarship is about $7,500. So how can I get more financial aid? That's the question that everybody should ask. We think the school has just one application out there, and that is your admissions form. So we take all of the data that is coming from that admissions application. That includes a matrix score we put together and those kinds of things to be considered for our financial aid scholarship programs. You'll see it on the website and on that catalog. There are a number of things that you can do around your community, and that's where most of the dollars come from the first year. So as you look at what options you have, technically, I see more scholarships tied to the families, things the families are involved in, whether it would be in their church or their association of their parents. This is where most of the dollars students bring to the school are being awarded from. As you look at how can I get more aid, look in the community, look in the resources that you may have through the school, and that would be the school guidance or counselor's office. Look in the organizations that your parents are involved with or you're involved with, and even maybe a community library, that kind of thing. Sometimes there are dollars left over in a community that are not designated and they become scholarship programs. The community foundation is what Charleston has, but look in your community for resources like that. The second way to get more financial aid, unfortunately, is to go out there for families and look at options to borrow money through different sources. So these federal, the FAFSA and the financial aid process has access to credit lines through the federal government called the Parent Plus loan and those student loans and those kinds of things. So what you sometimes have to do is go out and get funding through a private educational loan, and you would look in resources that if your family was part of a credit union, or if your family had access to home equity loans, those kinds of things. Different kinds of resources are out there, depending on what your circumstances are, that may be more financially advantageous to take than the student loans, or what we call the Parent Plus loans, which the new interest rates on those are going to be about 2 percentage points lower than they were the year before. So those are pretty good options. All right, here's another question, a little more specific to an individual, but maybe. I have received the Army ROTC 4-year scholarship, as well as a track scholarship. How will these two work together? And so you have a process where the Army scholarship is specifically for tuition, and you cannot pay tuition from two sources, from two different sources. You have to, basically, in this case, you would pay tuition from the ROTC scholarship. You pay the room, board, and books and uniform charges from the athletic scholarship. In typical circumstances, you cannot exceed what's called a cost of attendance. So there is a limit, And if you have looked on your financial aid page, it's roughly about $5,000 more than what our actual tuition costs are. And these include personal expenses and transportation costs that you would technically get a refund for at the beginning of each semester. So typically that's how that process works. There is a limit called the cost of attendance, and you'll find that on the financial aid resource page when you're looking in the same gateway. All right, so the next question. I received an email saying my financial aid file isn't complete. Again, the same gateway is going to be our communication link to you and your family. That Lassane Gateway portal has a financial aid spotlight in it, as well as your account information. And that is where your parents would find your bill. They actually would pay their bill, your bill, online. You never receive documents by email or by mail. You only receive an email notice telling you to go log into, and look at that secure server. And so all of the information that we're asking for in financial aid is typically a document that has to be completed or signed, verification form or tax form if you're selected for verification, or an affidavit to sign for a particular scholarship. All right, so when will I know what scholarships we have through the school or the Citadel? Those scholarships are posted now. So hopefully you've been able to find those on the same gateway under the financial aid spotlight. And there's some instructions and some videos down about how to view your award and navigate through the portal to get to your awards. The next question is, are there any scholarship opportunities for students who are named valedictorian or salutatorian of their graduating class? And there's not one scholarship that's out there for every student who graduates in the top of their class. There are scholarship programs that use valedictorian as a point. So when they are putting together a matrix for the total points and the student's eligibility, we are including that as a something that gives them extra credit above those others. But engineering and typically is not going to award a lot of scholarships to students in their first year. You have to come in and compete with your class. You have to stay in the engineering program and be successful through the basics before they start awarding scholarships, because I think there are a larger percentage of students who begin in the engineering program that decide they don't want to continue in it. And so it's just happened to be a way to better utilize the scholarship programs with those programs. There's a specific question in here about the yellow ribbon program. Now that's, again, more specifically for students who may be using their parents' GI Bill benefits, but the Citadel is a yellow ribbon participant. So we do offer the out-of-state students who are coming in with partial awards. I guess they have tuition assistance through the GI Bill, which pays for in-state. The school will add basically $7,500 to that award, and the GI Bill will match it, so you get an additional $15,000 if you're out of state. All right, so let's pause here and see if we can generate some questions through the program here, or if there's another way to run this program. Derek, I'll count on you to come back and help me manage this a little bit. So do you have any other questions that you see in there?
No, not in the chat, but for all those that are joining us, you now have the ability to unmute yourself. So if there's anything that you just want to jump in and ask those directly, you're more than welcome to do that, as well as take advantage of the chat feature that's here.
All right. So I see another question coming through, but you're going to have to help me with.
So it says, can out-of-state students apply for Pell Grants?
The answer is yes. The application for that Pell Grant is, like most, the FAFSA form. That free application for federal student aid is how you qualify for the Pell Grant and most of the other scholarship programs that we have through our office. And I think we're going to have to broaden this up and even let them ask you some questions, even though I know this is Financial Aid Day. We'll certainly broaden it up and see what kind of resources that the students have in general.
Sure. One of the things that in my past life as a college admissions recruiter, one of the things that I told students and parents is that there's a lot of websites out there that will try to trick you into paying for FAFSA. Like if you go to FAFSA.com, they'll charge you $85 to file the FAFSA for you. But the first letter in FAFSA is free. So if you're somewhere that's charging you for a free application for federal student aid, you know you're in the wrong place. That website is studentaid.gov. Again, that's studentaid.gov, or if you just search FAFSA on Google, you should either go to a .ed site or .ed.gov site. If you're at a .com site, you're probably in the wrong area. And the Citadel's financial aid website also links you to these resources out there. So looks like we've got a few more questions coming in. So if a student is committing to the military, is there a break in the sophisticating junior and senior years?
Basically, the process for students who are wanting to go in the military would be take advantage of the scholarship application. So you would apply for a scholarship that would be paying your tuition. If you were not able to actually receive the scholarship as a competitive process, there's going to be more applicants than there are awards, then you could potentially take a contract in your junior senior year, which typically means that they are paying you a stipend each month, but you are still paying your tuition. And so the break is very small unless you have the ROTC scholarship. Your commitment to the ROTC guarantees you a job when you get out, and you have the training between your junior and senior year, typically that is taking the place of your officers candidate school. So it gets you ahead of a lot of students. There are reasons that you'd want to go ahead and sign up and take the contract, but you want the scholarship. And so the real answer is not much of a break unless you are awarded a tuition scholarship. And in that case, it's $37,000 against your $50,000 cost as an out-of-state student, or about $14,000 for a $25,000 cost for an upper class student here.
We've got another question from Luke. Have all of the merit-based scholarships been given out?
Yes, Luke, we think that we ran through the process at the beginning. We still are awarding some small amount of dollars each week as we go through and replace awards, or we find new awards from the foundations. But in general, you're not waiting on other awards from us, and we're not asking you to make an application or to call us or doing anything else. We have all the awards that we have for this freshman class up. If you have a outside scholarship, you would notify us of that, and we can go out there and look. And if you have something like a 3-year ROTC scholarship that you haven't told us about, you want to go ahead and let us know that, because we do have a matching fund for that first year to help students who are out of state and have a 3-year ROTC scholarship. So in general, our awards are there. We're looking for families to tell us if they can't afford to attend. We are just trying to keep track of that. It's not that I have a lot of money to re-award to anyone who would ask, but we are trying to get as better, as much of a feel for what families are seeing right now and what they're expecting from the schools. So be sure to contact us if you're having problems. I just don't have dollars to give out to everyone, even though I wish I did.
So we have a question coming from Miss King. How does scholarship money populate to financial aid payments?
In general, when the billing cycle works around July 1st, you're going to get your bill notice on that, let's say, gateway. The financial aid would be deducted from the amount of the bill. And if we round those and say an in-state student is paying $30,000 for the year, it would be about $15,000. And if those students had $10,000 in financial aid, it would be $5,000 for the fall. So their bill would be $10,000 and $5,000 for the spring. So you would see that reflected in the account section of Lassane Gateway.
And somebody's asking if a GI Bill can be retroactively paid if they enlist after graduation.
Unfortunately not. They, and I hate to even talk about it because I don't know as much about that, but they used to have student loan repayment programs. They were called SLRP programs. That these are dependent upon the services need for you to continue your enlistment. And so as there's no guarantee for families, so I hate to talk about it, but there are programs out there. If you're in a field, and I would guess engineering would be a very in-demand field, then it's possible after your initial enlistment or sometime in that first 3 or 4 years, they would come back and say, well, we'd like you to take some additional time, give us another 3 years, and we'll give you an enlistment bonus or pay up to a certain amount of your loans off. But again, I don't want students using that because it's not always available. I think it's somewhat dependent upon the service and what their requirements are.
It looks like we have a couple of questions along the same theme. So if somebody's getting a scholarship and some other form of scholarship, how does that all then work towards tuition? And then what happens with maybe money that goes beyond what tuition costs? So if somebody has more scholarships than what tuition is.
Well, I'm very happy that our students have these options out there in front of them. Typically, we don't have so many things that are above our cost because the school includes not only your room and board and books and supplies, they also have some built-in things for haircuts and laundry and dry cleaning. So a lot of your costs are absorbed in our initial Citadel's tuition and fee bill that you get at the beginning of each semester. The only caution to this is that certain programs, and those would be ROTC programs that are specifically related to your tuition costs, are going to have to pay your tuition, and you can't pay from 2 sources the same cost. Because it's a federal program, it has to go in and pay first, and then there is no remaining cost for anything else to cover. But in general, our costs are including all of your initial things here, plus a cost of education, including transportation and personal expenses outside of what we charge. And so students can get up to their cost of attendance, which for let's use an out-of-state student for this example. Cost of attendance for out-of-state freshmen is somewhere around $59,000 now, I think. The true cost for tuition and fees is about $55,000. So an ROTC scholarship would pay $37,000 of that cost. That would be what your tuition is. So if a student got another $10,000 in scholarships, that certainly has room between the 37 and the 55 to pay for their room and board. And so you wouldn't have any extra money left over. But let's suppose that student got $25,000. Well, in this case, they're over $62,000 in cost. And typically, to stay within your cost of attendance, if it was including scholarship dollars, a lot of times the scholarship programs would say, hey, look, if they have more than their cost of attendance, we would prefer you to return it to us, and we could then use it to help other students. But again, the cost of attendance is the $59,000, not the $55,000 that it costs. And so most students can get about $2,000 to $2,200 in scholarship dollars refunded to them each semester that they would use for their personal expenses of transportation and personal expenses.
We've got a great question from Michael Tamburino. Are there any funding sources, either loans or grants, for those impacted by COVID-19 that we should be aware of?
You know, the school has received about $1.2 million in CARES Act funds. They are not awarded to students who were not enrolled during last year. They were awarded specifically to refund those students who had costs incurred during the spring term. So there's nothing additional out there yet. We know families may have a change of circumstances with the COVID crisis, and maybe their family's employment or the income coming in is not as high as it was. And that process is called a special condition. And we have those forms in our office. You would send an email as a family to the financial_aid account. We would go out and request that family fill out the form for the special condition using their 2020 projected income as opposed to the 2018 income that we used on the FAFSA. So there are programs, not specifically for COVID, but the program that we have in place allows you to file for all of the other financial aid with change of circumstances.
We're getting a lot of questions about ROTC scholarships. Now, I want to remind everybody, in 2 weeks, we actually have cadre from our the different service branches here at the Citadel. But a lot of them are talking about how do they get a scholarship in their first year. And I mean, if you know anything about that, or if that's probably best answered by the cadre 2 weeks from now.
Well, I'm going to always say go to the experts. In general, those 4-year ROTC scholarships you're applying for them when you're in high school. That would have been last December, would have been the deadline. And not too many options for you to apply for the 4-year scholarship as you begin your attendance here. I'll just tell you, in general, you're going to establish a GPA here your first semester. You're going to take the PT test, and you're going to have some aptitude scores that they're going to include. And so freshmen will be competing in their second semester to get in line for those 3-year scholarships that they'll be offering in the sophomore year.
Great. Looks like we've got a question from Christina saying that she's got the Palmetto Fellow Scholarship and the Citadel Scholar. Does she need to do anything to activate those funds?
Well, more specifically, you're going to have to go back to the Palmetto Fellow Commission on Higher Education with a form indicating the Citadel as the school you plan to attend. The Citadel Scholarship is just an award that we have and will be offset with that to basically give her up to the cost of attendance that we were talking about. So no, she shouldn't do anything other than communicate back through CHE that she would like to use the Palmetto Fellow Scholarship here at the Citadel.
Great. And it seems like the Citadel Scholar will then just cover the rest of it, and then whatever is over will then go to other students, because that was the second part of her question.
We believe that she, again, has the ability to receive up to about $2,200 each semester for her personal expenses that are not covered by the scholarship. And the remaining would be deducted from that Citadel Scholar total up to her cost of attendance. That's what we would keep them under. And that's a requirement of Palmetto Fellows, not a requirement of the school, but Palmetto Fellows does not allow students to receive more than their cost of attendance.
You know, I come from Florida, and I know that the process to establish in-state residency or tuition is pretty arduous. Are there any ways for students to establish in-state residency now? We're getting questions from Leanne here.
You know, in general, it's their families that have to establish a residency here. It's not the student. So a student who is living in the barracks here is considered institutional housing. It's not a permanent residence. And the laws that are within the state are at something called CHE, so the Commission on Higher Education, che.sc.gov. So use that as your resource. That is where the residency guidelines are. And you can actually read not only the legislation, but the regulations where they talk about this is how you establish residency in South Carolina. And so it sort of gives you the guidelines and the pathway to do that. Very difficult for our students because you can't work off campus, you can't live off campus, and this is a cadet program that we're talking about. And so almost impossible for a dependent student to earn enough money to be independent and to separate themselves from their family. So in general, you would move here before you began school and establish a residency. It would not be after school began.
Thank you. And we've got a question coming from, looks like a parent. How and when can we establish a payment schedule with the treasurer's office?
We believe July 1st is the billing cycle. They are going to set that payment plan up at the same time they deliver the bill. So you'll see the payment plans will begin July 30th, August 30th, September, and October. There are 4 payment plans that are set up during each term.
Great.
But very simple to do online. There's not a much of a process other than putting your student's name and ID number, including the first payment, and sending it in before July 30th.
We've got a really good question from Deborah here. For private student loans, can you comment on how long those might take to process or get awarded out to the students?
The students could probably apply anytime after June 1st. And so we're basically within that 90-day window of using the same credit and a disbursement. Families who will apply and begin the process, there is a link on our Citadel financial aid page called Fast Choice that details the different programs that students are using here and the link for the application. If you go out now, apply online, the student would include the name, social security number, date of birth of their cosigner. Credit check would be run within 10 minutes, and they would know whether or not they were eligible for the program that same afternoon.
And generally, from what I understand too, it depends on who they're getting a private loan from and their own processing time before those are wired over to us, correct?
I might have forgotten to answer the question like that. The funds would be delivered when school began. So the school is always the recipient of those private educational loans that do not go to the student. There are ways to go out and do different kinds of loans, as I mentioned, the home equity and some other different ways to go through. But the educational loans are going to come to us typically after drop add which means it's the first week of classes. In other words, students actually have to begin school and are making it through that first week before the funds would be dispersed to their accounts. Thanks for adding to that, because I don't believe I answered the question.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, we're just throwing questions left and right at your head, but thank you so much for taking the time to answer these. One of the things that I learned working behind the scenes is that expected family contribution amount and all of the calculations that's going in there. So we've got a question from someone saying, from the FAFSA form, how is the EFC determined, and is there a way for them to appeal or dispute that amount?
Well, the process basically just takes the family's adjusted gross income minus their taxes and what they're paying in Social Security and what the feds call a living allowance, which is basically a poverty level living allowance for a family size. So let's say it's 20,000, depending on where you're living. If you're living in high tax state, they take more out for taxes. And so they try to do some calculations regionally about what the family is bringing in or showing on their taxes, and then what they're paying out through taxes and what they call a standard level of living. So the family it's all based on that adjusted gross income. So as I mentioned, the special condition process allows us to, and you're filing the FAFSA form with 2018 adjusted gross income from your federal tax return. They're not going to let you use any other tax return information except what's in that law, that legislation. The school has the ability to let you project your 2020, what we expect you to, basically we're going to ask you to document what you've earned the first half of the year from January through June. And then we're going to ask you to project with some documentation from your employment what your income is for the rest of the year. And we're going to use that number. That's going to be your appeal to the special conditions process to change that EFC number on the FAFSA form. We believe that's the only process that we have or that you have available to change that EFC and qualify for different federal programs.
Right. My sense is that all students have already done a FAFSA. Is that part of their entry requirements?
No one is required to do a FAFSA form, but to receive federal aid, they have to do the FAFSA form. And that's, generally speaking, most of our freshmen. I have more FAFSAs than I have freshmen because, again, people are across the nation filing this thing and including us. So generally speaking, people have already done it. It's not a requirement, though. No one's required to do it to get the state life scholarship or any of those other types of scholarships, even academic scholarships from us. It's just if you want the federal Pell Grant or need-based aid, the FAFSA is a requirement.
Great. It seems that there are just a theme of questions about finding other sources of financial aid and trying to learn a little bit more about you, because you don't have a bio on our page. Looks like you've written several books out there about finding financial aid and other sources of funding. What tips would you give to people out there? So we've got somebody who owns a small business, and is there funds for tuition for small business owners or dependents of small business owners? We've got other parents out there that are first generational or sending a student that might be first generational minority. What tactics would you suggest for others to go out and find other sources that we might not know about here at the Citadel?
Well, in general, I think the scholarships that I have had experience with are coming out of a community that the family somehow was associated with. the larger scholarship programs, and let's say the Coca-Cola Foundation or the Bill and Melinda Gates or those national scholarship programs that are out there, are families are going to find them very competitive. But they might receive thousands of applications and only award 10 scholarships. And so you're much more likely to receive some funding if you can find a program that not everyone in the country is applying for. And so I believe what I'm finding is that most families are going to see they have much more success with things that they are either associated with through their church, their school, their community, or where their parents work. And let's just say a realtors association, the South Carolina Realtors Association. Well, guess what? They have a scholarship that's out there for all the realtors in South Carolina. If you work for the Merita Bread Company, well, there is a national headquarters for Merita Bread that has a scholarship program that they're giving just a few scholarships to, but at least not everyone in the country is applying for it. And so to get those kinds of dollars, I believe you should be looking through your own associations, things that you are tied to, things that you are, as an individual, good at, and let's say band or those kinds of writings and those kinds of things. You know, you're going to be more likely to get an award than someone who's not interested in music from a music type school. And so try to find out where your talent is, try to find out what your associations are. The second piece of this is to go national. So you have the one suggestion that says most of the dollars are just coming in because our students are bringing them from things they're associated with. But I think it's called FastWeb. There is another link out there on our website for the larger national scholarship search links. There are a number of them there. And you are going to put in some biographical information. This is a student filling this out, or as a parent, you're going to put your student's information in. You're going to be disclosing some details about religious activities, those kinds of things that they're going to try to match you up with. And you're going to get a list of 1,000 scholarships that you're eligible for. And you're going to have to write an essay, and they're going to have deadlines. And, you know, those kinds of criteria are going to be included with those. It's almost guaranteed that since this is a free scholarship search, they're going to spam you back as much information about credit cards and everything else that you could find, because it's a national search. So just expect it. Come up with a, you know, good Gmail account that you don't plan on using again, and just use it for your scholarship search and put it in. And you're going to find that those things are those things for Eagle Scouts, those things for all the types of Boy State, you know, everything that you've done, they're going to have a national scholarship for it. And they're going to give you an address to write to. And you would never pay any money for any of these things, right? You mentioned it earlier about what people are looking for. There are plenty of advertisers that are just trying to give away one scholarship. And the reality is they're just trying to get Google links or Google hits, so they get, you know, their spot in the whatever you would call the link when you go up and search for things on Google show up as. So there are different reasons that people are offering scholarships. They're advertising them, but, you know, again, you've done the national search, you've done the local search, tied back to things military. All right, here's one that you hopefully will find. It's called Need a Lift. If you have a parent or a grandparent that was in the service, American Legion puts out a book every year called Need a Lift. And if you were in the 82nd Airborne, then this is the place where you go and get that scholarship from. You know, it's descendants. So there are lots of places to get money. I think, in my experience, and I've done it for 30 years now. So in my experience, the results have been things that the family has some association with. That's been much more successful than looking out at that larger community to be competing with everyone. And then again, I could pose that same question if I could to the group and see if any of them have been successful or would be willing to share something that they had been successful with. We would pass that information on.
The other thing that I'd like to add to that too is once you're here with the School of Engineering, we have a number of different organizations. So we have NSBE, which is the National Black Society of Engineers, or National Society of Black Engineers, and they have specific scholarships. We have one for females, so SWE, the Society of Women Engineers, but a lot of those funds aren't available until you have at least completed your first year in engineering, because they want to make sure that you're sticking with the major. But we're going to have a lot of specific engineering organizations that you'll be able to apply for likely after your first year in engineering. There's engineering groups out there for everyone. And we have quite a few of student organizations here within the School of Engineering that go to those specific interests or demographics. So we only have a few more minutes here. Are there any other questions out there that didn't get answered? I'm seeing a lot of questions about ROTC scholarships. Again, I would invite everybody to join us 2 weeks from now. Sorry, not 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, on June 23rd, the same time. We're going to go with the 12 p.m. time, where we are literally going to have every branch of service, so Marines, Navy, Army, Air Force, join us to answer your questions about military scholarships, career opportunities, the benefits of a ROTC contract while you're here. So that opens up additional training and leadership opportunities while you're here, as well as some financial benefits, maybe in the form of scholarships like Mr. Fuller had mentioned, or different stipends. Again, go ahead and save that date for June 23rd. We will be bringing all of our reps from ROTC here. It looks like we have a few more questions coming in. So can you talk a little bit about the work study program and how that works for cadet students?
I can. In general, the first year students are not going to be eligible for work study because they don't have any time in their day that would allow them to work on campus. All of our sophomores through the seniors are able to qualify for work study, or able to get a job on campus. Generally speaking, they're making $8 to $10 an hour, depending on how many. Each year you get a raise. You're generally working 20 hours, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a pay period, and you're paid every 2 weeks. So plenty of work study positions are here. Your first year, you are scheduled 25 hours a day. So just no time for work that first year, but after that, the FAFSA form is all you need.
And we've got a question coming from Tiffany here about summer research opportunities that would allow for additional funds. It would depend on the faculty members that are hiring for student research assistants. So what you want to do is you want to be a really good student and get to know faculty members really well. And so that way, if they're looking at finding someone to hire to assist with research, I know that we're hiring 2 of our own students to assist with some research over the summer. But again, those opportunities came out of a great relationship between the faculty member and the student. And so again, I would encourage all students that might be looking for summer research opportunities to talk to their professors over the course of the school year to see if they are working on something over the summer. And I would say a lot of faculty members are, but they might not necessarily need research assistance, but I know that there are opportunities out there, and those are going to go to the students that have those great relationships with faculty members. So again, you want to make sure that you're a superstar student in the eyes of your faculty members. Mr. Fuller, do you have any other last words of advice?
Well, no, I'm saying good luck to everyone. I hope we all can find a way to help you, matriculate and see us in the fall. I know that these are some different times for families, and I think the school has been able to work with students in the past. I certainly think you'll be successful if you can make it through here in your chosen field. So you just got one of the best majors that we offer here. And congratulations to all of you for being in this far, and look forward to seeing everybody in the fall.
And what's the best way if students have questions after this to get in touch with your office?
Well, now, financial_aid@citadel.edu is the office email. My email is fullerh, FULLERH, @citadel.edu. So certainly use the contact information. Thank you, Derek. That is available. And let us know and let me know if there's any questions that I can answer for you.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, if you have any questions after this that we can assist you with, make sure you go out to our financial aid website. My contact information, I'll go ahead and post once more in the chat screen. So if you want to write that down and you need assistance in getting connected to the folks in our financial aid office, I still remain a resource to you guys over the summer. Feel free to get in touch with me, or if you have questions that are of a sensitive nature, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We want to make sure that we get answers to all of your questions as you determine your next steps forward and where you're going to school. So, all right, and with that, thanks so much for joining.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, Mr. Fuller.